Here we go. All right, let's see.
Surgery.
Okay.
Good morning.
I think 99% gone.
Okay.
She still has to go back and scan. She
Yeah.
does know she has to do treatments.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
We're going to let coming in for the next minute, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Emily, can you see my screen?
Sure can.
Okay. All right, maybe we'll give them one more minute and go this today. We'll get the prize for being here early and on time.
Here we go. We've got about half the group that we normally have.
Yeah, so I was thinking, all right, we'll go ahead and get started, and then can just, Emily, if you'll just keep letting them in as they come in.
Sure.
Yay, Beth, look at you go, girl. Your chat is working. What? That's exciting. Okay, so good morning. It is Emily, and the other Emily is also here with us this week.
Hi.
Glad to have her back. She learned lots of things at her training last week, and she's already started. I'm sure y'all all get to experience some of that as well. Today is session 3 of our part series, Leverage Leadership 2.0 book study. We will kind of do the same format that we have been doing. We'll revisit the chat as we go through, but feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourself and talk with your mic as often as you'd like. We are recording, and we'll send this out to you, as well as we'll send the chat transcript as well, so that you can read and follow along there. So session 3 today, we're going to review chapters 2, 3, and 4. Chapter 2 was in reference to planning. Chapter 3, observation and feedback. And chapter 4 was about professional development. Okay, our norms that we created together: respect for diverse perspectives, reminding ourselves that we come from different schools, different parts of the state, different sizes, different years of experience. What happens in the group stays in the group. We hope that this is a commonplace, an environment where you feel like you can share and ask questions and participate in the conversation. Engage and remain active, and to share the mic. Let's not get on our soapbox, and remember that there's other people here. Yes, Hugh. Hugh is saying my name in the chat. I'm not sure what he needs. You want to say something?
He's saying you're unclear. At the beginning, when you started talking, you were going out in and out, but it's more consistent now. So I'll stop you. I'll stop you if it starts again.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. So share with us what lingered. session 2, what lingered even from session 1 and session 2, what's sticking with you from our last time? Oh, good. Thanks, Hugh. I'm glad it's clear now. Sorry about that. What thoughts have you had that have carried over from our first couple sessions that you may have already put in place or are thinking about putting in place?
It's Emily. I just actually caught up on the recording from the last session, and I appreciated Mary Nell's comment where she was talking to a teacher, a social studies teacher, I think, that had like assigned an essay and had thought, you know, the other teacher had already covered some of the things he was grading on. So I just reminded me of my days in the classroom and being mindful with your teachers to help them figure out where those gaps are and really decide how they are assigning assessments and how they're assessing things based on what was actually taught versus what they thought they taught.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything that's lingering with you that you'd like to share? All right, then we'll keep going. Last week we talked about, I apologize again, especially for you, Emily, I forgot to start recording, as you probably noticed. I apologize to y'all when I started recording. We talked last week about protocols that I learned at Standards Institute this winter and how powerful it was in taking an assessment or an activity and kind of taking that activity or assessment to the student and then kind of backtracking on what standards and what content needed to be covered before that activity or assessment was put in front of the student. So I am finalizing my planning for that this afternoon, and you will get a link from me this afternoon. I'm making sure that it fits. I can get it to fit into an hour. I don't want to waste your time, and I also don't want to long. So you'll get a recorded, or I'm sorry, not a recording. You'll get an invitation from me this afternoon. It's optional. It's just kind of an extension of our talk here. But since it's not directly related to the book, we're kind of going to have an offside session. It'll be tomorrow, Tuesday, June 16th from 9:30 to 10:30 is my current plan. So I will send that link out this afternoon in case you wish to join us at that time. All right, so when we wrapped up session 2, we said your pre-reflection to get ready for today was to reflect on your lesson planning expectations of your educators. So share with us, what is your lesson plan expectation? Do you review those? If you do, when and why? What feedback is offered? And then do you coach for planning? So share out loud with us or in the chat, what is your lesson plan expectation for your staff?
Anybody?
Hey, this is Deborah at Bridges. So the expectation for our lesson plans is we've provided several different templates for the teachers last year, and then they could choose the template that best fit their needs. But the expectation was that they were on the desk so that when we entered the room that we could review them at any time, and we did not require them to send them in for anywhere or anything like that, though.
So what I hear you saying is that they would be available. So if you were to ever to come through for an informal or a formal walkthrough, you'd have access to them to make sure that the teacher was on target. And you could also, I'm guessing, glance to see what has been taught previously and then also see where that educator is going to go for the rest of that week.
That's correct. And then they would bring them in for our cluster meetings as well. So we could, give them feedback on them. And assist with any planning during those cluster meetings.
Good. Okay. And do you anticipate that being your same procedure this year?
To my knowledge, I'm not 100% yet, but I believe that's how we'll proceed. We're not, I don't want to, like in some places I've been in the past, it's been like a gotcha mentality where you have to turn them in and somebody's checking them and all that. And we don't believe in that at our school.
Good. Yeah, that's very similar to my last classroom experience. Same thing. They weren't reviewed. They weren't. There wasn't like a due date, but they knew you had evidence of it, and it was out and available if they were ever in your room. So yeah, in that scenario. Who else wants to share with us? Thank you, Deb.
Deb, I was just going to ask, do you guys have like core components of your lesson plan, or like everybody has to use the same template, or is it really whatever works for the teacher as long as you can see what they're teaching and where they're going?
So we gave them 2 different templates, but then they could also use something different. The only thing that we really asked was that they had their objective and student-friendly terms, and that was posted and communicated with the students, and then make sure that they had like differentiation and grouping, and so that it wasn't just whole group all the time. But there wasn't a hard set, you have to use this template.
Thanks. So we've got in the chat first from Lynette. She says, what does she say? It's not letting me expand. We have a format we like for our teachers to use. Lessons need to be aligned with the subject-specific standards, and they need to follow, or they need to allow for a clear do, we do, you, I do, we do, you do. Lesson plans are submitted by Sunday, and admin review plans on Monday morning. If anything seems off topic, or if there seems to be downtime, one of the admin will ask the teacher what the thinking is behind the lesson. Next year, we're looking for an emphasis on HOT opportunities and building of rigor. And Hugh says, lesson plans generally follow the same format of 5 E's with an intent of moving from I do, we do, you do, to engagement.
Nice. Lynette, what is HOT? That's not something I'm familiar with.
Higher order thinking.
Oh, there you go. Okay. I've never heard it called HOT. So now I get you. No, you're fine. Don't apologize. We were on a meeting earlier today and someone said, oh, let me get ready. Emily's about to throw all these acronyms at us. So now you've educated me. Very good. Anyone else want to share out? We're reflecting on our planning and expectation of plans for educators.
This is always an interesting conversation for me because in the new school application review process, the schools are asked to kind of spell out, like, what are you going to do for lesson planning? What are the components? And everybody has a different idea of what that looks like. And so just hearing what you're actually doing and the why behind it is really interesting to me. And then Hugh just explained his 5 E's: engagement, exploration, explanation, elaboration, and evaluation is from the 5 E's framework. Thanks, Hugh.
Yes.
Yeah, we at GTCHS, we don't require formal written lesson plans unless there is ongoing issues that we see through observations. When we do, we give them intensive feedback and review, with them being due the Friday night before so that we can, or the Thursday before, so we can review them on Friday before they go to teach it the next week. But if we go into classrooms, then obviously we would expect to see either the lesson plan or some sort of agenda and objective on the board, so that we know what to expect in there. So
yeah, that's good. I worked for an administrator who would always say, I hired you as a professional and I will treat you as a professional until you give to do otherwise. So it sounds like you built that culture where you know what's going on, and you're respecting them as a professional until then. So yeah, it kind of just depends too on like where you are in your journey. If you're coming into a brand new school and maybe it's a struggling school, maybe this is a place that is a priority for you. Maybe you've noticed that this is a gap. This may be something that you implement after you notice a gap or until you get to know, experience what they have going on.
Right. And I just always go back to my mentor teacher who, as a younger teacher, I was required to write out every single.
Yes.
And then as I became more experienced and, I'd kind of not perfected, but really gotten my Declaration of Independence lesson plan the way that I wanted it, and it was engaging and worked well, I knew that so well in my mind that I could just write Declaration of Independence, cooperative learning groups, and I knew exactly what that meant without taking time to explain it to someone else.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And like you said, you don't want someone filling out a document. You want them to be doing it for themselves. And so it's nice too to hear what Deborah said earlier, that they don't necessarily require a certain format. If you have something that's working for you, that's okay too.
Yeah, and Patsy at YLA just agrees with Mary Nell. She says our philosophy is the same as Mary Nell's regarding lesson plan.
Mm-hmm. Good.
We got one more comment here. Hugh says we generally review as grade level teams with myself with the hope that the teachers share strategies and are essentially teaching the same standards at a relatively coordinated pace. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did anybody read this and realize that maybe they had a practice in place of collecting lesson plans or like requiring a submission of lesson plans, but never actually doing anything with them? And maybe we'll implement a change there.
Yeah, that's a good reflective piece if you feel like you're in that bucket. I'm doing it, but we're not doing anything with it. So why are we doing it? So yeah, it's a good reflective question as well.
Yeah, I know one school that just shifted from, since its inception, never requiring lesson plans to last year requiring them to be like an abbreviated form of their lesson plan to be put online. And it seemed to be more about communicating with parents what was going on in the classroom rather than really any instructional or learning piece from the administration side or with evaluating them from that standpoint. And that was really an interesting take to me because it really created some fierce pushback from teachers because it is a high performing school and it is a school where that has never been part of the planning process.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting how that was received. Some people were like, well, I'm just going to take whatever I generally do and throw it up online. And other people like really resented it. So it is interesting, and I think it does matter if you're going into a struggling school versus a high performing school. If at a high performing school that's always been done, that's one thing, but to implement something without the data or the research to show why it's necessary versus walking in and there is a huge disparity and gap in learning and students are struggling, like you have to have some starting point maybe to have teachers do those things too. So
yeah. Agreed. Thank you for sharing. So we're going to go ahead and move into the meat of our chapters. This comes from page 91, and the discussion I'd like to have here is just for us to unpack this statement together. Reflect and think, like, what does this statement mean to you? How does it relate to your current daily practices? So page 91 says, data-driven instruction is about plotting the route, and effective lesson planning trying to get there on your first try.
Okay, Emily, you might need to just shift a little bit because you seem to be popping in and out again.
The participant or my voice?
Your voice.
Oh, okay. Well, you just keep telling me. Okay. So basically what I said is I read you this quote here, and I just wanted us to have a conversation about what does this mean to you? Like, where are you in your journey with using data to inform your instruction, to plot the route to rigor, and then where does training come in there? This states that it's about trying to get there on your first try. So what are your thoughts when looking at this statement?
Hi, Emily and everybody. This is Brad from Midlands Arts Conservatory in Columbia.
Hey, Brad.
I will just say this statement, I underlined it when I read through it the first time. And I think this, to me, this reinforces to some of those veteran teachers why I want to see lesson plans, why I want them to be productive lesson plans and effective lesson plans, not just like we were talking about at the beginning, just throwing something up on the internet to satisfy a checkbox for the principal.
Right.
A thought process. This isn't just a description of what you've done for the last 20 years. This is, why are you doing what you're doing today? Why are you doing what you're doing next week? And it is about planning with the end in mind. Not necessarily teaching to the test, but here's where I want to be. Here's where I want, and we're a brand new school, relatively speaking, and something we're adding a 9th grade next year, and we'll be adding, 3 more grades till we're fully built out 6 through 12. And I've tried to get our teachers to understand my first year there, this current year, that we want to have in our minds what our students are going to be like when they graduate high school in 4 years, that first class. And then
Right.
If that's what we have in mind, what is it going to take that senior year for them to get there, the junior year to get there, and back all that up all the way to 9th grade, 8th grade, all the way down to 6th grade. In order for us to get there, we've got to be doing these things 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. And if we got to be doing these things in 6th grade, we got to be doing these things first semester, and all the way down to the first week of the school year. This is what we need to be able to do so that we can get to that rigorous end of the year or that rigorous senior year. So I think it's a lot about the plan and making it work effectively and productively. And really, for a lot of people, re-envisioning what a lesson plan is. So it's not I get teachers from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different districts, as a lot of us probably do. And they've done it, 50,000 different ways up to this point. So reimagining it and not it being such a tedious process, but a productive process.
Right. Yeah. So what I hear you saying is that there's an importance there, even for the veteran teachers, to have a thorough lesson plan in place to show evidence of what's happening today, but that you also mentioned the importance for vertical articulation across the grade levels and a scope and sequence even within those grade level bands. So
Right.
my guess is that your PD is heavy on, not only what are you teaching today and why, but where is the student coming from and where do we need to get them to? So yeah, thank you for sharing. Anybody else? What does this statement say to you?
We've got a comment. Why can't I see it all? From Hugh. I think that it speaks to addressing student needs and utilizing backwards design, where what scholars need to know and master as the driving force of planning. This requires effective screening of where students are on a continuous basis.
Yeah, amen. You need a constant assessment to inform instruction. So yeah, you're saying that that drive the instruction is important. Yes. All right. Moving along. All right. So our next discussion point comes from this is kind of like where your what hat you wear. Are you wearing your admin hat right now? Is your coach wearing a coaching hat? A coaching hat on? Do your adept evaluators and mentors, like kind of where do all of these lines blur? The questions that I have here for you is, does your school have coaches and evaluators, or are they one and the same? Are the roles and the people separate? How do you draw the line between them? And then what does staff say about this? So like, have you polled your staff about this? The quote here to kind of guide us is from page 129 that says, what made that feedback so powerful, the teacher didn't just hear sound advice. She practiced exactly what she needed to get better. Ashley didn't use her observation to evaluate. She developed her in the most effective way possible. So when you're thinking about coaching and offering your teachers feedback, it kind of depends on what hat you have on. Truly in a coaching role in that scenario after an observation? Are you in an observation for the purpose of evaluation to maybe feedback or may not, depending on what time of the year it is? So kind of talk us through that. Like, where are you now in this? Or do you feel like you're in a good place? Or are you in such a small school that the lines are blurred and you would love to one day separate them? So kind of talk us through that.
Anybody?
Who wants to share with us?
Here we go. Okay. Patsy at YLA, she said our schools are small, but we use a team approach. So Patsy, can you say a little bit more about your team approach?
Well, we try to approach everything as a team approach. As the director of the schools, myself, the principal, and the instructional coach work together. And sometimes it depends on the subject area who coaches following a suggestion. Sometimes it depends on the relationship that one of us might have with a particular teacher. And sometimes we pull in another teacher to do that coaching, pull in somebody who's really good at that to do it. So it really depends on the situation. And we enter all of it with the idea that it's not about evaluation, even though evaluation has to be part of it. That's not what it's about. It's all about coaching and understanding that we all can get better at what we do, including the director and the principal and the instructional coach.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you're taking what you see in your observation, identifying areas of growth, and then going and finding the experts in that area to do the coaching for that teacher.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also heard you say, Patsy, that there's a time and a place for evaluation. Yes, it has to be done. Yes, there's a purpose behind that. And yes, there's feedback built in, but it sounds like you're working to create a culture, just like the educators are giving constant feedback to students. You're, as the administrative or as your team that you've created, are giving constant feedback to the educators. I like how Lynette added in here a comment. If we're modeling for our students, why wouldn't we model for educators, for our teachers? So yeah, I completely agree. It's really powerful when you can sit down next to a teacher and not just say, here's what I saw you do, here's what I would love to see you do, but here's what I saw you do, and let me open your eyes to a new strategy or to research, and let's create a plan together to get you there, and then let's schedule our check-in times to kind of guide you along the way. I said this to y'all before, but as a coach, I was always the one that needed to have I commandeered classrooms often when I didn't have a group of students to say, can I come try this with you? Because I don't want to coach others on it until I've tried it and lived it on my own. So that's something to think about too, is that when you're coaching, what have you lived? Because it gives you a lot of street cred with the teachers when you have lived it on your own, and you can say, here's what I did wrong. Here's why, and here's how I fixed it. Yeah.
We also have a comment from Beth at Creeks. She says, I'm a coach and evaluator, but I feel that the new teacher standards and the way we're evaluating now makes it easier. When I do an evaluation, the pre-conference and post-conferences are definitely coaching conversations.
Yeah. And I think that's just a way that our state has grown. So think back to our old models when you had to wait, evaluation tools, when you had to wait for that mid-year conference. They had to wait like sometimes 3 months to get feedback, and you could not offer anything. You couldn't say how it went. So yeah, now we're in these short timelines of within 48, 72 hours, we're actually sitting down and having these coaching conversations. Good. So you're wearing both hats, but that you're able, because of SCTS 4.0, be able to wear both of them.
Yeah. And then we've got Brad at Mac. He says, small school here. Last year I was everything. I'm adjusting things for next year to get some teacher leaders to do some coaching and mentoring, and a guidance counselor to help coach as well.
Great. And that sends a message to your staff too, of they a safe place for those coaches and those mentors. So that's good.
Mm-hmm.
I like that, Brad.
And then Amy at Loco Montessori says something that's dear to Emily Baker's heart. We have a reading coach that's totally separate and never evaluates, and this works well. She supports and models what teachers need. We're small and we have a team that evaluates. The evaluation team includes myself, the school leader, the SPED coordinator, and another teacher. We also go in and model lessons and have focused more with struggling teachers with this approach. We have a growth mindset for all and make that a focus across the board. Next year, we're streamlining the discipline piece, and we're hopeful that this will allow for more modeling in the classroom and more time for observation and feedback.
That's awesome. I like it.
Yeah.
And it's nice go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's nice to, I know that MOA for the reading coach can sometimes be hard. But I'm in a small school and I need this person to also do these things. But like Amy said, it's really powerful when they can truly just coach. They can truly just focus on growing teachers, so that teachers can focus on growing students. So yes, I like it.
Hugh said, Brad, that was the same situation here. So small school doing everything. Christy Williams at Next. I'm in a similar boat with Brad. We're small. Her campus is Eagle Ridge. And trying to expand the roles of teacher leaders and others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The more credentialed staff you can get, the more it can help. But like she's saying here too, you've got to identify who your teacher leaders are, and there needs to be like a respect, not only amongst that educator, but that educator and the staff too. So that can be tricky to identify those teacher leaders.
Yep. Maybe for our next book study, we'll read Breakthrough Principles, which has a really great section on finding your teacher leaders.
Mm-hmm. I'll add that one to my list too. All right, anything else here? Okay, so comes from, I don't even know what chapter. I'd have to look at where page 135 falls, but when it broke into planning for feedback and observations, and planning, I mean on your end as the evaluator or as the coach, and it's always hard. Everybody says, I need the time, no matter what we're in, no matter what location. If you sit down and talk to administrators or educators, I just need the time. So this was a really interesting visual that broke down. If you're, remember, this book breaks it down to the 1 to 12 ratio. So 1 evaluator, 1 coach to 12 leaders is kind of what the magic number that they suggest. So that if you're observing in each of those 12 classrooms for 15 minutes a week, that makes up 3 hours of your week. If you're offering feedback and planning for those 12 in 30-minute blocks, take up 6 hours of your week. So total hours devoted to teacher feedback is 9 hours of your week, which actually only breaks down to 20%. So it leaves you 80% to do all those other things, which is a hard mind shift change. It's interesting to like go back into your schedule and actually break down your minutes. So what thoughts did you have on this? Like, wait, I'm doing it completely wrong, or still there's no way that I could get this to happen. So what were your thoughts here on this visual?
I will say that as a former math teacher and statistics teacher, I loved it. But as a principal and school leader, I think, how in the world am I going to do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
But in the same way, though, I feel like it's something that is, when you break it down like that, it's doable.
Right.
And,
so you just have to make the commitment.
Right. And I want to be doing a lot more than 20% of my time in instructional leadership. That's what I want to be doing, so it's got to be just, this is what I'm going to do. I'm starting the year first week, and of course I try to stay away from those first couple of days, but after that, I'm all in. I'm coming in and we're doing it. So
yeah, but even those first couple of days going through and doing walkthroughs, because while the educator is getting those routines established, it's also getting the students used to those bodies being in there.
That's right.
What is Mr. Tillman doing in here? And
right.
The more you're in there, the more you become part of the routine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hugh adds, go ahead, Marianelle.
Well, I was just going to say, I looked at this and thought that 12 is a lot, even when broken down this way. That's 9 hours, which might technically be 20% of my time, but 1 out of 5 days of being off campus or in a classroom or in anything is hard. And that's essentially what you're saying if you're doing 1 out of 5, 20% of your time. And so while it's ideal, I also know that 12 teachers times 15 minutes isn't taking into account the 5 minutes to walk to the classroom, the 10 times you get stopped on the way to the classroom, things like that. And so I think it's kind of like how running a 5K would be ideal for me, but I need to do the Couch to 5K program. So maybe my goal starting out this school year would be to get in 8 a week or 7 a week so that I can feel some sense of accomplishment and have consistency with it, rather than set myself up for this audacious goal of 12 and then not meet it and still beat myself up about it.
Right. And these chapters also mention, like, even if you every other week, so if you commit yourself to 6 and the other 6 next week, you're getting that feedback and that coaching time in with those educators at least, which can be really powerful if you're coming from maybe once or twice a semester to twice a month. Your student growth should take off, as well as your teacher leadership and your teacher growth. So yeah.
Right. And with the way that we have our teachers, the number of teachers to our admin and coaches, doing that consistently with that number every other week should be doable.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Hugh had added, being intentional with carving out blocks of time to do just this is essential, with the feedback sessions being vital to giving the teacher the opportunity to practice. Making it every week at the same time each week and the staff being familiar with it is key, so that you're not pulled out of this agenda to do other extraneous things.
Yeah. Yeah. And this brought to my mind too, another part of this, these chapters that talked about in those coaching sessions to only giving one action. 30 minutes that you have allows you to build out, like, how are you going to take this action, put it into your daily implementation. And then because it's only that one action, when you meet with them again the next week, you can look in that next 15-minute observation. Did they apply it? Do you see evidence of applying it? And kind of keep pulling it back to that one action until we have mastery before we move on to something else.
The one thing I would add here is that in this equation, I think getting in the classrooms and seeing your teachers teach is very, very important. But if you don't follow up and provide the feedback, then it's a waste of everybody's time. There is nothing more frustrating as a teacher than to have an administrator in your classroom, like, constantly and never hear good or bad news. Just the coaching part is so crucial to the process.
Yeah, I was going to add a couple of things to that. sorry, I was just going to say that one of the things I will say, I agree with Mary Nell completely about the setting those goals too lofty at the beginning. But I think that first week is probably, as far as like discipline and drama and all of that goes, is one of my lighter weeks every year. And so if I could get in there that first week and hit maybe not even 12, maybe even like 15 or 20 that first week with some coaching to get some like action steps, the groundwork laid for some action steps. And then, the next week I might only hit 6, and the next week I might only hit, 7. But I'm getting in there and putting forth a good effort and trying. And I agree with Emily Paul about just that coaching. That's probably been my biggest challenge the last few years, not only in this school but other schools, is the follow-up coaching, pre-conference, post-conference, being productive coaching, not just great job, let's keep moving. Let's keep doing what you're doing. So
Yeah.
just my
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, we're doing great we have a Google form created for feedback. And so if we do observe a teacher right now, we take a Chromebook with us and we give them immediate feedback. But the actual follow-up, sit down to talk about things, feedback is the big piece that that I'm excited about incorporating.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, and I was going to say too, on what Brad said, when you get in there early, feedback in your coaching, maybe on transitions or even like handing out of materials or access to materials and those kinds of things, and how powerful that can be to help the teacher become more effective, because at those beginning times, you may not see content take off, whereas this year you may see content take off right away. We may find that people are thinking, okay, these routines mean nothing while I have this child in front of me. I just got to go. I completely understand, but really help them craft and make effective use of their time for the year at those beginning times when you can coach on those routines and procedures before the content gets really deep and rich. Good. Okay. Moving on.
I just wanted to share a quote. This is Deborah. When I first was an assistant principal, I had read an ASCD article that said I should be spending 50% of my time with teachers. And I could never, figure out how to make that work. And I had a quote right by my clock, and it said, "You will never find time for anything. If you want time, you must make it." And that's what I think about, with the walkthroughs and the feedback is, if you don't make it a priority, then time will consistently get away from you. You have to make it a priority. And one thing, with those constant being stopped in the hallway, I always had, a purple clipboard. And so teachers knew if I had the purple clipboard in my hand, don't stop me and ask me a question, just send me an email. Because they knew I was headed into a classroom for, a walkthrough or an observation. So communicating that with your staff so that they know, that you have this time. And same thing with your front office staff, for parents that call or people that stop in, that they know this is the time that you're going to be in classrooms.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like that. So that the educators are respecting your time at the same. And I like how it's just a simple clipboard. I know that in previous when I would observe educators, there's some educators that would put on like now granted I was in an elementary building, so you high school people will probably laugh, but there were some, elementary teachers that would put on like a special headband or hat, and that students, like, you may not bother me now unless you're on fire or bleeding kind of thing. So sending that same message to your staff, that makes complete sense. And that's a really quick way to implement, that immediately. Along the lines of what Debbie just said, speaking of ASCD, I don't know if y'all heard, but to put a plug in for them, they're offering their conference this year virtually, and it's free. So they just announced it this morning, but it's the middle of July. It's going to be 2 days, and it's going to be completely free and virtual. So those of you that follow ASCD, there's an opportunity coming up that I'll be there. So scream if you want to collaborate during those 2 days.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, so moving on to professional development, discussion point here, what PD do you offer your staff right now? Like, what are your current offerings? Who does most of the talking and working during professional developments? And then what do educators leave with that they did not have before they came in? So this quote kind of guiding this discussion here is, most PD doesn't make a difference in the classroom because you talk about things, but you tackle the hardest part, doing it. You leave it for the teachers to figure out when they go back to their classroom. But when I give them the opportunity to practice with me right then, we get more results right away. So what are your thoughts on that?
While we're waiting for people to chime in, one of my most favorite professional development opportunities was where the instructor carved out time in their PD to allow us to build the materials that we were going to implement and practice with our peers. That, like, I remember the first time that happened, I walked away like, wow, what a novel idea. Like, we can learn about it and we can start to learn how to implement it and think through, what is this actually going to look like in our classroom?
Yeah. Part of leverage leadership also said, like, reflect for yourself. What was the best PD you've ever attended? So yeah.
So Patsy says, no matter the content of our PD, we have made a choice as a leadership team to conduct PD meetings as if we were being evaluated with the 4.0 rubric. I love that. So we're conducting PD and modeling every time. And she said, and Hugh says, PD on dealing with difficult students and disengaged students. I think that this is a key practice of the most successful schools, where PD are more like an interactive class than a lecture, where staff members are given opportunities to practice on each other using role playing, etc. So yeah, I think like both of your comments are aligned, and I think if we know our students don't learn best when the teacher's standing in the front of the room just talking at them, then why are we expecting adults to learn that way too?
Yeah, and a lot of this also, like you said, is kind of becomes part of your culture at first when you're in front of a new staff, or maybe you have a new starting with your staff this year, modeling those interactions and their expectation of educators during that time. Ask a teacher to role play, and like, you're going to play the student and you're going to play the educator, that kind of thing. First, it's really awkward. So practicing with mundane, like weird, you're the student and you're just going to have a conversation about what you had for dinner last night, and the educator is going to probe you on these like coaching conversations kind of things of students, kind of modeling with the easy part at the beginning, so that when you bring it back into your practice over and over again, it just becomes part of your culture and your nature. Say to Patsy, Legacy does something very similar, and somebody on here at Legacy can chime in if I misspeak for you, but I know a lot of times at Legacy, I've seen that when someone's giving PD, there's always another administrator or leadership team member in there, like you said, evaluating and offering that feedback so that they're also continuing to grow. Yeah, good practice.
Brad loves Patsy's idea about incorporating the 4.0 in mind when they're giving PD. Mary Nell says, yes, we ask, what is the most interactive and engaging way we can present this information? We also clearly differentiate between PD and sharing information, like how to conduct the active shooter drill versus an actual professional development. But even with the active shooter drill, not just lecturing the material.
Yeah. Good. And yes, pulling the educators learning back to 4.0 is powerful too. Yeah. Not just the teachers to the students, but getting those teachers on the 4.0 is important as well. Good. Any other thoughts here on this, on PD? So another question that I just wanted to pose, what actions can you take in these next 2 months to set your PD up for success in 2021? So as you look toward next year, I know we're closing course from 1920 right now, and I feel like the end of June, beginning of July is when we can really start going full gear into the next year. So as you're having these conversations, what actions can you take to ensure the best PD offerings for your staff this year? Does anybody have anything they're already working on or that they're going to make that you'd like to share out?
So honestly, right now, my staff is very concerned about social justice and trauma and social emotional learning PD, more, and then the things to go with COVID-19 and what might have to change, than they are the types of things that like we're dealing with, reading about improving these specific action items and observing and lesson planning and all, which the e-learning kind of goes into that. But so that's really where I'm kind of trying to figure it out. The PD options, they're wanting to start something in July, so they have processing time on a volunteer basis. And so I'm trying to wrap my mind around what that will look like and what I can offer them for that. So
I have some great news. Sarah's comment along those lines. We're looking at trauma and SEL trainings to address needs at the beginning of the school year. So I don't think that we've totally made this public, but we actually, as a district, just hired an SEL coach. She will start on July 1st. And so you guys can count on a lot of support in social emotional learning. And so hopefully that is helpful for you in your professional development process. Courtney at Midlands Middle says, I plan to be searching for PD option around e-learning, flipped classrooms, etc. It would be great if the district could help us to collaborate and find a common resource. Oops, it skipped. I feel like this will be a big need for all of our teachers. Yes, definitely, Courtney.
Yeah, the one thing that's hard for us, Courtney, we've talked about this, like what PD can offer to support you in this shift to possibly a blended learning environment or going back and forth like we did this past year. But the hard part for us is everybody works on different platforms. We can't tell you if you all need this platform and that kind of thing. So yeah, those are conversations that we're having, but it's hard when we are potentially on 36 platforms and offerings. It's difficult.
Brad also doing some voluntary PD in July. And then Lynette, I'm currently working on a series that will cover data-driven instruction, closing the achievement gap, and building positive and productive school culture. Cool.
That's good. Yeah, going back to your point, the times have shifted in ways just since March. So while we went from traditional to e-learning really quickly, and we went into this virtual space, now there's added layers of all the things happening outside of schools as well that we need to acknowledge, plus the students and what they have lost, not only academically, but in the realm with not being in your facilities for that amount of time. So yeah, you have a lot to decide kind of where does your priority lie in regard to content of academics versus the well-being of your staff and students. So yeah, it's got to be hard, and we empathize with you there.
Well, and I know for me, I think that exploring ways to set up my calendar best and things like that in order to do the observation feedback or the PD loop in terms of PLCs and having the opportunity to practice in front of peers. I'm not sure what chapter we're on as we read and go through this, but I know one of the things mentioned teaching a sample lesson. And I think while not all of my teachers are quite comfortable enough and trusting enough to do that with their peers yet, I think doing that on, by department, to have one of the math teachers who's brave enough to present a math lesson to her department and get feedback would be great. But before we can even wrapping my mind around what it even looks to be back when South Carolina keeps rising in COVID cases is hard.
Yeah.
And Mary Nell also commented to Courtney that she has a teacher who loves flipped learning and would probably be happy to lead a session to be helpful. She says, I think that just roundtables about what we're doing in-house and what specialties we could offer each other would be beneficial. So I am happy to set just like another, what is this platform called? Microsoft Teams meeting up, where if, y'all have access to each other, and I can put it out in operator notes tomorrow and just ask everybody to kind of come ready to share out what they're doing and with their questions. Maybe I'll do like a question survey first so that we all have topics, but yeah, happy to do that.
That would be great, because I think connecting to each other is like Emily Baker was saying, like it's really difficult if we're all on different platforms or all on different things to know exactly what the district can provide. But that opportunity to just have the space and time to talk to each other about what each school is doing and sharing that and hearing the feedback is a positive thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an important time for us to work smarter, not harder. So even if you find in, like Emily said, posing just an open forum for y'all to share, if you could even just connect with one or two other schools that are on your same platform, that can be powerful, so that you could share resources and maybe even collaborate together on rather than, building 36 times.
Yeah. Patsy says, we're working with Clemson University's Think Shops, discussing possible collaborations with PD this year. They have some great offerings. Yes, we actually were working with them a little bit at the district. They do have some great offerings. Hugh, PD will include a definite focus on an effective blended learning model going forward, as well as the social emotional issues surrounding the new norms of school. Yeah, like Emily said, I think we're just in a really new and different time, and there's so many considerations that we have to consider this summer before going back, and how to support not only our kids but our teachers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So what stood out to you? We're going to open the floor to you from chapter 2, 3, 4. Was there any quote that you had questions on? Was there anything that you were like, ooh, I'm already an expert at this, I'd love to share my expertise? What stood out to you from chapters 2, 3, and 4?
I know just from my perspective, reading chapters 2 through 4 makes me a little more excited about getting in there and being an instructional leader again. It's kind of got, I was getting a little burned out with the drama and the discipline and everything else, and having the Corona break and this extra, I consider like a double summer, actual time to sit down and work on stuff for next year is pretty exciting.
Good.
Yeah. Patsy says, your PD is only as powerful as what you practice, and that is powerful. I had highlighted that too. And the other one that I highlighted was make the complicated simple and the simple powerful. So break it down and then make it really meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
Hugh's got the quote, the smaller and more precise the action step, the quicker the growth. Be bite-sized, not bite-sized. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, one thing at a time. Sarah's got, I appreciate all the planning, feedback, practice on PD, and the DVD pieces are very helpful. I'm just trying to adapt it to our unique environment. Yeah, I think that's, Sarah, the struggle you all will always have is you're so unique. Yeah, just adapting best practices to your unique environment.
Anything else from these chapters?
I really like the idea behind just like we want the teachers to practice and share ideas and make sure that they're on target with their learning things. The idea of the coaches going in together at the same time and then coming out and discussing what feedback you would give versus what feedback I would give in order to collaborate that and make sure that the messaging from all of your coaches is similar and that you are giving the best feedback possible.
Yeah. I've always done the same thing with evaluating too. So iterator reliability and all going to, we would go and break up our leadership team in groups and we would purposefully go with someone who we didn't necessarily interact with every day, maybe not at our same grade level, or upper elementary versus lower elementary kind of thing. And we would, for those first couple walkthroughs and evaluations together, and like you said, collaborate on, if we were to score this, what did I see? What evidence did you collect in here? And then also that coaching conversation on like, what do you think is the most bang for the buck for this teacher right now? Yep, I like it.
Patsy's got, by receiving biweekly observations and feedback, a teacher gets as much development in 1 year as most receive in 20. This can be extremely rewarding practice. Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
This is Christy at Next. And the part on planning where they talked about rigor and relevance really struck home with us. I think my teachers do a good job of trying to make content interesting, but the rigor often lacks in that piece. And so trying to bring those two together where that skill and content come together is something that we need to work on in the coming year.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Okay, so takeaways, and this one I know is a lot because it's chapters. But Emily and I like to kind of leave you with like, what could you do right now? What do you need the support of your staff for? And then it's just some things to remember. So what could you implement right now? Schedule, and this is kind of, you talked about this today, but scheduling your weekly feedback meeting with each teacher before you plan when you're going to observe him or her. You'll have a built-in accountability tool for yourself so that if you have Brad scheduled for 9 to 9:30 on morning for his feedback and it's Monday and you still haven't gotten in for the observation, you know that you need to make good on your promise for that teacher's time for that 30 minutes. Make sure that you prioritize your time on that Monday to make sure you get in, so you have something feedback on. So that's something that when you're scheduling your feedback meetings, schedule those ahead of time so that you're holding an accountability system for yourself up front. Increasing your credentialed staff so that coaches and evaluate entities. If this is something, a lot of you said that this is something because you're a small school or a new school that you didn't realize up front because you didn't, maybe it wasn't on your radar at that time. It wasn't important to notice who had what credentials, but kind of increasing that staff to be able to separate those lines so that the evaluation separate from the coaches can be powerful. What can you implement with the support of your staff? Make sure that at least 10 minutes of every hour-long lesson is devoted to independent practice. And that's something like a mind shift change for your educators where, okay, lesson plan, you have an hour block of time. How much are you actually quiet, stepping back and allowing the kids to go into independent practice here? Also be brought into your PD. So for each hour of your PD, allowing at least 10 minutes each hour for independent practice versus yourself or your group being the sage on the stage. Teachers, a great objective must be accomplished in one lesson. So breaking off that small objective of what does mastery look like in this today. The objective may change and kind of morph across time, but that there's some form of mastery for our lesson today to monitor. It's hard when an objective kind of goes across a unit and that shift change that you may or may not need to have, but I have an objective for the unit. Okay, well, that's 3 weeks. So let's work to break that down into day to day to kind of monitor along the way. Seeing the exemplar sets teachers up to be able to put it in action. So just like your teachers model for your students and make sure the exemplar alongside a rubric so the students know what the teacher's expecting, you can do the same thing for your teacher. So what is an exemplar? Physically show them one. allow them to experience one so that you can be able to put those steps in play. And then these two quotes stood out. If you know the exit ticket and the independent practice, you can, students will struggle. And then the decision of what to teach becomes clear. Okay, so looking at the assessment, what you're asking students to do independently, and then pivoting the teaching based on that. The greatest source of buy-in, the simple answer is results, results, results. So what stood out to you? What could you implement immediately? What do you need the support of your staff on, or any other quotes that you'd like us to all make sure we have highlighted in these chapters? Nothing else? Okay. Looking ahead at next week, we'll meet again on Monday, June the 22nd for session 4. For session 4, take a look at your week and decide what percentage of your week is observation feedback. And you might need to go back to your calendar from February to look at this, but kind of spend some time reflecting on what percentage of your time do you make observation and feedback a priority right now? Where do you want to see yourself moving forward? Like I said, we'll meet again June 22nd. We'll discuss chapters 5 and 6 around student culture and staff culture. And the reflection for next time, I might send probably Thursday or Friday. I might send y'all just a quick Google. Excuse me, for you. Finish a statement. I'd love to make like a Wordle or something, or to share out kind of your statements here. How would you finish this sentence? I want a school where students are blank. And this will kind of help us guide in our discussion in chapters 5 and 6. So if you quick one question, finish sentence from me on Thursday afternoon. So you can work on crafting that there. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that I'm working on, and you should have from Emily and I, if not by the time you get this recording in this chat, but I'm scheduled for Wednesday morning. So hopefully by Wednesday, I'll have that Google Drive that we promised you started, where we'll drop all of the transcripts in just one place. You don't have to search through your email even after our book study is completed, but also a place for you to drop these resources if you wish, like lesson plan template or some of the resources that you talked about in session 1, that just kind of a place for everyone to dump, and then I'll share it with each of you so you'll have access to those documents for the remainder of our sessions and then beyond. Any other thoughts, questions for the good of the group before we move on? All right, guys. Emily and I will stick around for a minute if you need us. Have a great week, and the sun is shining where you are because it is cloudy in my house.
Yeah. Hey, and just one more thing. We have now officially made it through part 1 of the book. So if you have feedback on how we're delivering these sessions, feel free to email us, because we are definitely open to feedback and changing how we're doing it if it's not working for you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Hey, Amy. Yeah, I can stay on for you. I have you on my list to call back this afternoon too. I sent you an email to reply to your voicemail, just haven't gotten back on. But here, we'll let these people log off, and then you and I can chat.
I think I might be able to stop the recording too once we make sure there's no other questions.
Okay.
Emily Baker, real quick, I did get your email this morning, and I'm working on getting that back to you in just the next hour or so.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
All right. Y'all have a good one. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Emily, do you want to stop the recording?
Yeah, I'm going to see if I can figure out
Mine is if you push the 3 dots, you can click stop.
There you go.